Welcome to the Paradigm Shift on 4ZZZ 102.1, where we challenge the assumptions of our current society to resist oppression and investigate alternative ways of living, for a world based on justice, solidarity and sustainability. Welcome to the Paradigm Shift on 4ZZZ 102.1 FM. That's the station you are tuned into, and it is your local community, non-profit, volunteer-powered, independent radio station. My name is Andy, and I will be hanging out with you for the next hour, and we are broadcasting on Yagara and Turrbal country. Today on the show, I'm going to be heading around the town of Brisbane to find out what's been going on. I've been away for the last couple of months, and look, it's quite possible that some of you have barely left the house in the last couple of months from all the rain that's been going on, and I don't blame you. But there has been plenty going on. Plenty of campaigns and events, and plenty more to come. And all of the talks I'll be doing today will be linked in with other events that are coming up over the next few days of ongoing campaigns. Now, the three interviews I have, they also have another thing in common, which I think is pertinent to point out today, on a day when the next federal election has been called, and of course, so much political energy and media coverage will go towards that election over the next 6 weeks, and the rest of us will just have to put up with it. But the interesting thing about all the interviews I have today is that all of them involve people saying no to announcements made by our elected politicians. That these are people who have been given this power, but in some of these cases, it's been things that were nothing to do with their platform when they ran for Parliament, or otherwise they're things that aren't necessarily in the public interest. And so even though people have done the voting, the elections happen, democracy doesn't stop there. And these three campaigns are all people that have said, we are going to resist the government doing a thing they have announced they're going to do, and we're going to try and see if by force of, people power, getting together in a physical space, organising, mobilising our neighbours, educating people on the issue, if we can force politicians to change their mind. And it is an underrated element of democracy, but it is so important because there's just so few things to hold politicians accountable once they're in. If all we have is, one vote every 3 or 4 years, then it's not very much compared to the power of the lobbyists and the corporate interests, the political donors that hold so much sway in those corridors of power. And so the need for community campaigns of resistance is so vital. So today we are going to hear about three of them. One is spoke to Rosemary O'Hagan from the campaign to Save Victoria Park /Barrambin, which is the very large piece of inner city green space just on the north side of our city, not far from where I'm currently sitting in the 4ZZZ studio. Save it from the news that the Olympics are going to colonise this piece of green space to build big stadiums even after an electoral promise. In fact, both sides of state politics saying they wouldn't build a new stadium. Of course, in a cost of living situation, it costs incredible amounts of money to build a big stadium, and of course, incredible amounts of land as well. And so I spoke to Rosemary about their campaign to protect that bit of green space. I spoke to Shirai from the Kurilpa Commons from Growing Foward about trying to protect a little patch of land that people put a lot of work to, building a community garden over recent years, and a community space where people can gather, hold events, feel like they have some kind of control over a little bit of land in a city where everything's owned on this little bit of vacant land. Well, the private developers of the site next door have been pushing to have the commons removed so they can access their own site easier, and there was an announcement by the Department of Transport and Main Roads that they were going to get rid of the Kurilpa Commons community garden, ostensibly for soil testing, although they brought in some very big machines, somewhat more bigger than what you would think is required to take a soil sample. So a group of people gathered there to resist that and try to keep the Kurilpa Commons there. And also I spoke to Caspian from the Anti-Poverty Network about the community response to the announcement from Brisbane's Mayor Adrian Schrinner that he was going to remove rough sleepers from Musgrave Park and from other public parks in the Brisbane City Council. There was a very fast community mobilisation, and so far it has been successful, and the people have not been removed from that park. So there you have it, three groups that are deciding that part of their democratic input is going to be getting together and organising their community to resist politicians making decisions that they feel are detrimental to the public, and it's so important to do it. And we've got plenty to cover, so let's get into it. I'll start with Rosemary O'Hagan from Save Victoria Park.
My name is Rosemary O'Hagan. I'm on the committee for Save Victoria Park.
And Victoria Park is a contested bit of land at the moment, but it's got an interesting recent history, I guess. Can you start off by telling us a bit about Victoria Park, what it is?
Okay, so Victoria Park was established in 1875, so it celebrates its 150th anniversary this year on the 12th of November. It was originally 130 hectares, and the whole idea of these parks was sort of like a global movement, and that sort of Victoria Park was established around the same time as Central Park and Hampstead Heath, because the leaders at the time realised, for many reasons, that you needed a large, sort of substantive inner city green space, and that's what Victoria Park was for. Now, over the past 150 years, that 130 hectares has whittled down to 64, and we know we've got the ICB running through it. But that doesn't diminish the importance of the park. We've also had the park on the northern side, the Hurston side. It was sort of sort of sectioned off for golfers for a very long time. But finally we got that back, and the public got their land back, because this is your land and my land. They got back that land in 2021, and Brisbane City Council had developed a master plan. They did a 4-year consultation from 2019 to 2023, and it was to be this rewilded, tranquil retreat, and it was to pay homage to the Indigenous community, because this area is really important for First Nations. It's where they camped, and this massive sort of consultation process with all the impact assessments on the lighting, on the wildlife corridors, that was all done and finalised in June 2023. So as we move forward, in March 2024, less than a year later, that whole vision is thrown away, and Graham Quirk, ex-Lord Mayor, after 60 days, a 60-day review, recommends a stadium in the park. Now, effectively, this changes the whole dynamic. It blindsided anybody who had been following the master planning process. We're not sure where it came from, but we know it came from very few submissions that went to Graham Quirk. So then what basically has happened over the past year is we have been trying to educate the public as to what they have to lose, because there is a lot at stake. This is the last remaining substantive inner city green space we've got. It belongs to the people. It doesn't belong to the AFL. It doesn't belong to the cricket. It doesn't belong to the commercial interests that might be, attached to those businesses and those organisations. And we have now been just basically handed this land to sporting bodies, construction companies, developers, in the name of an Olympics, which is supposed to be underpinned by sustainability principles. It's actually appalling, and we have been trying to educate people on this for a year. I think people have not realised what they've got to lose. I encourage people to go up there and actually see the beauty and see what's at stake.
So, initially there was statements from both sides of state politics that they're not planning on building a new stadium or anything like that, which suggests that there isn't that much public appetite for new stadiums. But there's been a strong media campaign, and most recently the Olympic Review that David Crisafulli instigated after being elected has just come out in the last couple of weeks, and it's all pointing very much at building a stadium in Victoria Park, isn't it?
Yeah, so what had actually occurred was that we had a commitment from David Crisafulli to say no new stadiums. That's what he went into the election saying. We were very concerned because we had been hearing throughout Brisbane that this stadium was a shoo-in, okay, that it was going to happen. We hear that. Brisbane's a village. You've got enough contacts to hear this back. So I had David Crisafulli's number. I rang him. I left a lot of messages for him saying, can you please contact us and speak to us about the importance of Victoria Park? I got a call just before the election from his Director of Policy and Stakeholder Engagement, who emphatically told me it was not going to happen and Victoria Park was safe. Now, I wasn't 100% convinced of that, no. They then proceeded to have a 100-day review, as you'll be aware of. Say Victoria Park has questioned, and we've made this public, we've questioned the composition of who the 7 experts were on that panel. So they were advising David Crisafulli. The 7 experts did not include a town planner, an engineer, nobody from any sort of level of community or heritage or environment. So we would say that that process, the voice of the park, to people who wanted to protect the park, was potentially sort of not as loud or could not be heard as clearly and as importantly as the voices of the very influential and very well-connected pro-stadium lobbyists. And the other thing I might note here, and it's really important, not only has David Crisafulli not kept his election promise once, but he's done it twice. They're looking at 2 stadiums across this park, and I want to say something very, very important here. This park is not only just a park for you and I and everybody in Brisbane to be what was supposed to be the lungs of the city, but it's also heritage listed. It's got, all these heritage listed trees through it. It's got buildings that are heritage listed as well. There's a few smaller buildings. To put Olympic Stadium on heritage listed green space in 2025 is not something that an elevated city does.
And so there has been a number of events that Save Victoria Park has organised, and there is one coming up that's specifically about Aboriginal culture in the area. Can you tell us a bit about that?
Okay, yes. So we did organise events. We've done everything we can to try to educate the public, and it has been an uphill battle because we haven't had, the media really being overly supportive of communicating that. I mean, Full Triple Z did last year, but it's been a struggle to get people educated. So what we did was we had a big day where we had a bit of a rally, and we had people forming a big no. We had an artist day, so we had lots of these artists coming into the park and painting it and showing how beautiful it was. The event that's organised on I believe it's the 5th of April, is not organised by ourselves. That's organised through the local councillor, Sil Shongwa, and she is getting Brett Levy, who's done some amazing work on sort of understanding. He does a lot of artistic work, and he has this sort of virtual reality type of equipment where you can sort of see what this Brisbane would have looked like, Victoria Park being Brisbane, would have looked like historically. So he is putting on a First Nations panel. I believe it's on the 5th. As I said, it's not our Save Victoria Park. We're not political, so it's put on, but it is put on by our local councillor, and we'd appreciate if people could support it. Yes.
And if people are interested in keeping up to date with the campaign and getting involved, how can they do that?
Okay, yes, this is really important. We really do need people to start understanding what's at stake. We've got a legal challenge, so what we would like people to do is get on our Facebook page, and we're also on Instagram, and we've got a website. So that's Save Victoria Park. We are also raising funds for a legal challenge. We're going to do anything we can because this is precious, irreplaceable, priceless green space that will be concreted over for two massive Olympic stadiums, and we've got to stop this.
All right, thanks very much, Rosemary.
Great, thank you so much, Andy. Bye.
On the Paradigm Shift on 4ZZZ, we were just listening to Rosemary O'Hagan from Save Victoria Park with the proposed building of Olympic stadiums over one of the few large areas of public green space that we have. And I've got to say, I like sport. I enjoy it. I think it's good, and I like big events too. Even the ones that I'm not that interested in, I think it's good to have events where people get together and share experiences with other people. And so, big sporting stadiums, they certainly serve a purpose, but we already have big sporting stadiums in this city, excellent stadiums like Gabba, Suncorp Stadium. And I guess looking forward into how should the world do this kind of things in as ecological crisis is going to get worse, we need to not bulldoze green space to build new sporting stadiums. That's just going to be the way that we have to do it. And so for that reason, I think people should oppose the building of these new stadiums. The Olympics are just not that important, It's just a sporting gathering. Yeah, it's nice for what it is, but afterwards you just end up with this huge stadium that most of the time is not full. And of course, part of the Olympic plan is to demolish the perfectly fine stadium that we already have at the Gabba, just to build something that holds a few more people. And so there's plenty of reasons to oppose the stadiums at Victoria Park, as well as the fact that in the lead up to the election, David Crisafulli flat out denied that he would build a new stadium. It was one of the most obvious political lies in recent memory, but out of a long list of political lies, let's be clear. And so in that way, he should be held accountable. People should say, no, you went into an election promising you wouldn't build a new stadium, and we don't want a new stadium. Of course, the budget that they've given there's no possible way that building the stadiums will stay within the budget that they have suggested. So there's all kinds of reasons to oppose that stadium, and other things that are being opposed, other green space that is being made way for the requirement of development. And by development, they don't mean the betterment of humankind. They mean big concrete buildings. Is the Kurilpa Commons in West End, down right on the Maywar Brisbane River. There is an empty block of land. It is also owned by the state government and has been sitting empty for decades. And at one point during the COVID pandemic, a group of people got together, went down there, planted a community garden, and invited everybody, whoever wanted to come along and be a part of it. And over the years since, many people have been a part of it. But once again, in the last couple of months, Kurilpa Commons has come under threat, with the Department of Transport and Main Roads turning up with a bunch of police escorts one morning with some huge big machines coming presumably to demolish the garden. They weren't able to because the community quickly mobilised and put their bodies in the way, at which point they said really they were only taking soil samples, actually, because they'd heard there was soil contamination. Well, the garden is still standing, but there's still the requirement for a campaign to try to protect this, which is its own kind of public green space, but also is one that is autonomously made. You know, it's like a space where there was a little bit of room for the community to do something without getting all the permissions. It was because it was an empty block of land. And so it got made by people. Nobody staked a claim on it as private ownership or anything like that. They've made a community resource. And so there's lots to recommend protecting the Kurilpa Commons. And I did speak this morning to Shirai from Growing Forward about what's happening in that campaign. Let's have a listen to Shirai.
I'm Shirai. I do stuff with the Kurilpa Commons.
So the Kurilpa Commons is normally a pretty chilled out place of, growing plants and the associated activities. But in the recent months, it has been a bit more dramatic with big machines and threatening to bulldoze all kinds of things. First off, can you give us a bit of a description of what's happened at the Kurilpa Commons in the last couple of months?
In the last couple of months, TMR has moved in one Friday morning with a bunch of soil moving equipment and trying to fence off the commons. Luckily, someone was there to see that and let everyone else know, so people rushed down to stop that from happening. It pretty much stalled them on that day, and it's been in a bit of limbo ever since. The Minister for Main Roads has said they're not willing to negotiate, and TMR has refused to meet with all the collectives on our terms. So, yeah, we're just kind of in a state of limbo at the moment.
So for a while there was a kind of vigil going around the clock, keeping an eye on the Commons. What's the status of that?
We still have a roster going on of people who pop down every hour or so to make sure that there's no alarming thing going on that we should be worried about. And we also have a tip line for anyone in the neighbourhood who's wanting to help keep an eye on the place.
So the justification that the Transport and Main Roads used was about the worry about soil contamination on that site. But there has been also some clashes with the property developer next door. Can you tell us a bit about what the thoughts are about this supposed soil contamination?
Well, officially the reasoning for the soil contamination is that next door has indications of elevated levels. However, the commons are not in question themselves. There's been loads of soil testing done over the years. It's not contaminated. And if it was a sincere attempt, then the government would be enforcing health and safety regulations on the development next door, which hasn't happened. Currently, the development next door is under negotiations for access to the land that the Commons is on for their own site. So it's pretty thinly veiled in our opinion. And really it's just an attempt at a land grab to take back that land from the community and bring it back into the hands of the state and those who want to utilise it for profit.
And part of the idea of the Kurilpa Commons is it's more than just a community garden, even though it is a community garden as well, but it is a broader political idea about usage of land, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. The common farm is more than just about growing food. Although that it started with those intentions, it's developed into something so much more about looking at our social relations together and how we relate to each other and work together and make decisions regarding our own ability to look after ourselves and each other, and also our relationship to the land and the environment that we live in. So that's part of the reason that we do more than just like commenting there. We do other events as well, because we want people to have the opportunity to develop other relationships outside of a transactional nature in a space like the Commons.
And there has been a bit of a increase in events happening at the Commons. Is that a intentional attempt to get people down there and using the space?
Yeah, well, events have always been an important part of the Commons. We've definitely made an attempt to increase the frequency of them because it reasserts the connection with the space, but also we just want to encourage people to be there, down there, and make the most of the Commons and the community around it.
I'm interested in some of the events that have just started up. Tomorrow there's a talk planned about radical history with Jeff Rickett, and last night as well there was the beginning of a reading group about Brisbane radical history. I'm interested in why you're deciding to embrace like radical history, and I guess what this has to do with the broader idea of the Commons.
Yeah, well, part of the concept of the Commons is looking at physical space that we inhabit and how when we're removed from that space, we're also removed from, have a lot of the history ripped away from us. And so in holding more historical events, we hope that we can regain some significance in the space that we exist and work in and struggle in, all over, not just the Commons, but throughout Brisbane. And also learn from those experiences of those who've come before us and make the most of previous struggles and learnings and do so in a way that is like coming together and collectively learning.
All right, if people want to keep in touch about what's happening at the Commons or get involved there, what's the best way they can do that?
The best way to do that would be to hit up the Growing Forward Facebook page. There is also a WhatsApp group that has announcements if you don't want to be involved in the ongoing organising but do want to know if there's a red alert that comes out. The best way to get on that would be to probably message the Growing Forward Facebook page. And if you are interested in helping out organising the space, whether that's the defence or just the upkeep of the space, messaging the Facebook page and getting added to the WhatsApp groups that organise that would also be the way to go.
And how is the garden surviving amidst all this cyclone, rain, bulldozers on site, drama? How's the garden looking?
The garden's going great. We did have a few banana trees felled from the cyclone, but everyone came down and came together to clean up the site a bit, so it's looking a bit better. But also this time of year with all this rain and humidity, the Commons has heaps of work to do, keeping it from growing into a jungle. So if people are interested in coming to the Working Bees, we're currently doing them weekly, every Friday at 3:30 p.m. But maybe stay tuned on the Facebook page because the one today could be cancelled.
All right. Thanks very much, Shirai. We were speaking to Shirai from Growing Forward about the campaign to defend the Kurilpa Commons, which is the community garden and community space and temporary autonomous zone, we might say, in West End. There are several others, actually. There's one in Dutton Park as well and in Kangaroo Point, and I think still in Bulimba there's still a garden going there that was built by Growing Forward. And so there's been a few other attempts, but trying to make autonomous community spaces to provide food for any of those who need it, nutritious, fresh food. And the last interview I have on our show today, our roundup of people who have been resisting bad announcements by the government, is I've got Caspian from the Anti-Poverty Network here, and Caspian's been down at Musgrave Park quite a bit since there was the announcement by the Brisbane Mayor Adrian Schrenner that rough sleepers would be moved on from parks in Brisbane City Council, and they have not been moved on as yet, largely thanks to the community response of people like Caspian getting together to try to show that empathy and kindness are more important to people of Brisbane than, a park with no tents in it. And so they're actually right now, I assume it's going on, although it's a bit wet out there, but there is a rally going on outside the state parliament, I believe, in support of rough sleepers, and the name of that rally was called Kindness First, Support for Brisbane Residents Experiencing Homelessness, looking out for the people that are most on the margins, living extremely uncomfortable lives generally. Obviously, that nobody wants to see our parks full of tents, but there are different ways of approaching the issue, and that's to try to support the way of kindness. So I spoke to Caspian this morning. Let's have a listen.
I'm Caspian. I'm a refugee settler living on the lands of the Yagara and Turrbal people. I grew up on the lands of the Quandamooka people, and my ancestry goes back to Zoroastrian Baha'i communities of central Iran. And probably most interesting to you today in my capacity as a member of the Anti-Poverty Network of Queensland.
Yes, well, you're very interesting in lots of ways, Caspian, but that is the reason for our call today. So can you tell us a bit more about what is the Anti-Poverty Network?
The Anti-Poverty Network is a lot of things, but fundamentally, at its core, the Anti-Poverty Network is a community of people in poverty, people who've experienced poverty, fighting for people in poverty. So we kind of do that in a whole bunch of ways. I think a core function of the Anti-Poverty Network is the network that we build. We hold space for people to come together and organise and do stuff that serve our communities. A lot of our more tangible work is the mutual aid work that we do. So we've got street kitchens that run every week on the ground in Musgrave Park. We've also got networks of peer-to-peer advocacy for people on Centrelink, so you can get help navigating the quagmire that is the Centrelink system, making sure that people are on your side so that you know what you're doing and how to access your rights in that space. We've run community days over the last 9 years that we've been around.
And one of the things that recently has been keeping the Anti-Poverty Network busy is being down at Musgrave Park. A lot of people would have heard that the council announced they were going to move people on from Musgrave Park. So first off, can you give us in a little bit more detail what happened at Musgrave?
Well, it's important to start by saying that it's bigger than Musgrave. This is a city-wide announcement, and it's following on from council coming out with very hostile attitudes to homeless people in their community. And we saw that happen in Moreton Bay really recently, and immediately on the back of that, we had Brisbane City Council saying that they were no longer going to act with empathy and flexibility to the homeless population of Brisbane. And we're planning to send in police to evict people living in parks when those people have nowhere to go. Yeah, so that was an announcement that the council made about a bit over 2 weeks ago, and we've kind of seen since then a little bit of back and forth, I think, in response to community outrage at their announcement. We've seen some flip-flopping from the police about whether they're actually going to help the council do this, and then the council kind of doubling down on all of the lies that they've been spouting to justify this kind of cruelty towards our houseless neighbours in Brisbane.
After the announcement happened, it was the cause for a lot of people mobilising to support people that are sleeping rough in the sort of inner south area. Can you tell us what that community response looked like?
I guess we'll start from the top and get everyone up to speed. So Thursday morning, a couple of weeks ago, first day that the announcement went out through the courier mail, we had a group of us who are present running street kitchens from various organisations in Musgrave Park, doing the rounds in the park, just checking up on people, seeing what was happening on the ground. We had cops come through that first day, giving people move-on orders, telling people that they had to evacuate the park within 24 hours or that there'd be police come back to do something. It was not made clear to people what was going to happen. And within 24 hours, there was a snap rally, snap action in defence of our community. People in the park keeping eyes on the ground, making sure that our house's neighbours weren't getting bullied, and kind of plotting and scheming what we could do to make sure that this was not a policy that the council was able to push through. Because it's not in the character of our city, it's not in the character of people of Maganjan. We don't do that to each other. And the fact that the council thought that they could get away with just enforcing that, I think speaks to how out of touch that they were with the community of Brisbane and the people that they're supposed to represent. So following on from that, we've had community meetings, planning like how the community is going to respond and step up in defence. I'd highly encourage anyone who's interested in getting involved to check out the Interpublic Network Queensland Facebook, check out the Community Union Defence League Facebook. We both post pretty actively, and if you send us a message, we'll be able to link you into the organising channels where all this community planning is happening. One of the big things that we've seen is a major ramp up of our street kitchens. So street kitchens used to happen a couple nights a week. They're now happening basically every night of the week, and the goal is to reach like a 24/7 street kitchen in Musgrave Park, because we know that like these places where people can come and share a meal, like one that's where the relationships in our community form and the relationships that we have with one another are so important. But they're also an opportunity for people to come together, to get information, and to keep us updated about like what the needs are on the ground. Another big thing that we've seen coming out of the community since the council has made this announcement is something of like a community watch, a roster of people going through Musgrave every day, checking in on people, again, hearing on the ground what's been going on, making sure that there is a presence in case the police come around and are trying to violently move people on, which they have been known to do. Yeah, and that's something that we'd like to see keep growing.
Yeah. And probably because of that community response, people have not been moved on from Musgrave Park, and in fact the police have sort of said they're not going to enforce it. Can you give us any more details about that?
Yeah, I think it's that the two kind of spot on. I think that the reason that we haven't seen people being cleared and swept out of parks as aggressively as we've seen in the past is because of the unexpected to the police and to the council level of community outrage at this announcement. So I would say that while we haven't seen people moved on from Musgrave Park yet, we have had an increased police presence on the ground that has been ramping up. So there is concern that I don't think is unfounded that the council and the police are hoping to kind of keep things quiet for a little bit while they wait for the media noise and the media storm around this to die down, and hope that like the community outrage kind of fizzles out so that they have more clearance to just go in and move people on in the future. It's also worth noting as well that like from the reports that we've been hearing on the ground, while the police have seemed to avoid mostly moving people on from the inner city, where there is more of an organised community defence of the homeless, we have been hearing of people being moved on who are perhaps in more solitary or isolated situations out in the suburbs, kind of further afoot. So there's some concern that they're kind of moving people on where they can get away with it while they bide their time.
All right, and you did mention that if people want to find out more, they can head to the social media of Anti-Poverty Network or Community Union Defence League. But one other thing, while I've got you on the phone, we could just mention is that APN is organising a summit in a couple of months. Can you tell us about that?
I would love to tell you about that. So the Anti-Poverty Network of Queensland, along with a score of other grassroots anti-poverty organisations from across the country, are pulling together the People Against Poverty Summit in June of this year. So that's going to be June 21st and 22nd for anyone who's interested in getting along at Griffith South Bank in Maganzin. The goal of this summit is to bring people together, share skills, share knowledge, and plan how we can work together in solidarity. So we'll have more informational resources, sessions on the nature of poverty and some of key policies that are going to be impacting people, particularly coming out of a federal election real soon. But we'll also have really practical hands-on stuff like how to run a street kitchen and how to build pop-up infrastructure, how to work with your community and build relationships in your community and other organising strategies. And the hope is that we can bring together people from a whole bunch of different movements for justice and people who've never been connected to a movement before but know that something's kind of we fucked up about the state of the world and something needs to be done about it. And our political opponents are so well resourced and so well funded and so well platformed that the only way that we have a chance to kind of actually create the change that we know is possible and necessary in the world is if we're working in solidarity.
All right, thanks very much, Caspian.
You're very welcome.
You are on the Paradigm Shift on 4ZZZ. I was just speaking to Caspian from the Anti-Poverty Network about their efforts to defend people sleeping rough in the parks in inner city Brisbane after the council threatened them with eviction. And so far it has been a successful bit of people power, but they are ongoing there, and there is chat groups you can join, as well as following Anti-Poverty Network and other groups on social media. As I said, there's a rally going on right now outside 1 William Street. There's plenty of other things going on in Brisbane, and I will plug at this point the Brisbane Radical Events Diary, which is a weekly email that goes out to talk about all kinds of events that all kinds of groups and individuals are organising around our city to try to work together to make it a better place. And there is plenty of different things happening, from rallies to info nights, community meetings. We talked with Shariah about historical reading groups and historical talks. There is, of course, plenty of rallies, Palestine rallies and things like that, protests, and there is art exhibitions, political art exhibitions next weekend. There's a 3-day sort of art exhibition with talks and music, as well as visual art by Katrine McLeod. So there's plenty happening. You can find that if you search for the Brisbane Radical Events Diary, you should find it. But otherwise, the website is breadbne.substack.com, and you can get it into your inbox every Wednesday. And I'll see you on your radio next week, same time. Catch you then.